You've heard by now, President Trump is putting a 145% tariff on nearly all goods coming in to the United States from China, and that is going to very much affect you and your daily life.
Imagine this. You're the CEO of one of America's most iconic manufacturing companies, Freightliner. For decades, you've poured your heart and soul into building this business. You've created jobs, supported families, and driven the American economy. You've built factories, watched your workers punch in every morning, and seen your trucks roll off the assembly line, symbols of American pride. But one day, you walk into your office and see the headlines. Trump's tariffs hit U.S. manufacturers. Costs skyrocket. Your phone buzzes. It's your supply chain manager. Boss, steel and aluminum prices just went up 28%. Our raw material costs are through the roof. Every truck we make is about to get a lot more expensive. You lean back, staring at the wall, trying to absorb the numbers. The spreadsheets on your desk show shrinking margins, rising costs, and red ink creeping into every corner. You think about your workers, the faces you see every day on the factory floor, men and women who've built their lives around this company. You built this company to make America stronger, but now, it feels like the rules have changed. The tariffs, meant to protect American jobs, are hitting American manufacturers the hardest. And then the emails start pouring in. Your biggest customers, worried about price hikes, talking about switching to cheaper foreign alternatives. Your CFO walks in, a stack of reports in her hand, and gives it to you straight. If we keep these factories in the US, we're bleeding cash. We're talking millions in extra costs every quarter. Shareholders will revolt. We might have to move some production overseas. You close your eyes for a moment, picturing the American flag hanging over your factory. Moving production overseas. Is that what it's come to? But what choice do you have? If you stay, you risk sinking the whole ship. If you leave, you're abandoning the very workers and communities you've built over decades. You're caught in the middle of a political storm, and every decision feels like a losing battle. You pick up your phone, scrolling through the news. Another factory just closed its doors. Harley-Davidson moved production to Thailand. Ford is considering Mexico. You feel the pressure building. Every headline is a reminder that the stakes are high and the clock is ticking. And then it hits you. This isn't just about Freightliner, it's about the future of American manufacturing. It's about whether we can adapt, innovate, and rebuild our industrial power, or whether we let it slip away. So, what do? Do you fight to keep American manufacturing alive, risking it all? Or do you cut your losses and leave the country you once called home? If you've ever run a business, if you've ever put your blood, sweat, and tears into building something from the ground up, you know this feeling. The gut-wrenching fear of losing it all, the factory doors closing, the machines falling silent, the workers clocking out for the last time. But this isn't just about Freightliner. It's about whether we let these policies drive our industries offshore, or if we find a way to fight back. It's about the American worker, the families they support, and the communities they hold together. So, if you care about American jobs, if you care about the future of this country, hit that like button, share this video, and stick around. Because today, we're cutting through the noise, breaking down the facts, and asking the hard questions that Washington doesn't want to answer. Ready to find out what's really happening behind those factory walls? Let's dive in. Think about this for a second. When the Trump tariffs were first announced, the message was clear. Protect American jobs, rebuild American manufacturing, and put American workers first. It sounded like a noble goal, a patriotic mission to revive the backbone of the US economy. But the reality on the factory floor is far more complicated. For companies like Freightliner, these tariffs quickly turned from a patriotic promise into a financial nightmare. Imagine you're running a manufacturing business in the US. Every dollar counts. Every small fluctuation in costs can mean the difference between profit and loss. Now add a 25% tariff on steel and aluminum, the very materials your trucks depend on. Suddenly, the math doesn't add up. It's like trying to run a marathon with a 50-pound weight strapped to your back. Sure, you might finish the race, but you're going to burn out long before the finish line. And Freightliner isn't alone. Companies like Harley-Davidson and Ford have faced the same pressure. They've had to make tough choices, cut costs, move production overseas, or risk going under. But here's the kicker. These companies weren't just paying more for raw materials. They were also getting hit with a double punch. First, they had to absorb higher costs, which cut into their profit margins. Shareholders don't like that. Boards of directors don't like that. And Wall Street definitely doesn't like that. Second, they had to pass some of those costs on to their customers. That means higher prices for trucks, motorcycles, and cars, the very products that make these companies American icons. And what happens when your products get more expensive? You lose customers. They start looking for cheaper alternatives, maybe from companies that don't have to deal with these tariffs, maybe from manufacturers in Mexico or Thailand. And this is where the real pain sets in. It's not just about numbers on a spreadsheet. It's about factories closing, workers being laid off, and families losing their livelihoods. It's about the ripple effect on local economies, the small businesses that rely on these factories, the communities that depend on these paychecks, the schools that lose funding when jobs disappear. And once those jobs are gone, they don't just come back. When a company like Freightliner moves production overseas, it's not just a short-term decision, it's a long-term shift. Those jobs may never return. So the question is, was this the right move? Are these tariffs really protecting American jobs? Or are they just driving American companies out of the country? And if this trend continues, what does the future look like for American manufacturing? It's a tough pill to swallow, but it's a conversation we need to have. And that's exactly what we're going to break down in the next part of this video. The cold, hard numbers, the hidden costs, and the real stories behind these corporate decisions. Because if we want to fix this problem, we need to understand it first. So, if you're ready to dig deeper, hit that like button, share this video, and stick around. The real story is just getting started. Why would a company like Freightliner, an icon of American manufacturing, even consider leaving the US? At first glance, it seems unthinkable. This is a company that built its brand on American strength, hard work, and quality. Its trucks are symbols of freedom, independence, and the open road. But when you dig into the numbers, the picture gets a lot more complicated. Start with the basics. Trump's tariffs hit the raw materials that companies like Freightliner depend on: steel and aluminum. These are the backbone of every truck they produce. When those costs spike by 20, the ripple effects are immediate and painful. Imagine you're running a factory. Every pound of steel, every sheet of aluminum, every bolt and rivet just got significantly more expensive. It's like trying to build a house where every brick suddenly costs 20% more. That cost has to come from somewhere. Sure, you could try to pass it on to your customers, raise the price of each truck by a few $1,000s. But then you risk losing those customers to competitors overseas who don't have to deal with these tariffs. Or maybe you try to absorb the costs, keep prices steady, and take the hit on your profit margins. But shareholders don't like that. They expect growth, not decline. And if your margins start shrinking, those investors might start looking elsewhere. And it's not just about the numbers. It's about staying competitive in a global market where every dollar counts. Look at Harley-Davidson. When they faced the same pressure, they didn't just raise their prices. They moved some of their production to Thailand. That decision sparked outrage, but from a business perspective it made sense. They couldn't afford to lose market share in Europe, where retaliatory tariffs had hit their bikes hard. And then there's Ford. They've had to rethink their production strategy as well, moving some small car manufacturing to Mexico to cut costs. So, what's the lesson here? For companies like Freightliner, staying in the US means dealing with higher costs, tighter margins, and potentially losing market share. Leaving, on the other hand, means cheaper production, lower tariffs, and a better chance of surviving in a cutthroat global economy. It's a brutal choice. Stay and risk financial ruin, or leave and abandon the communities you've spent decades building. And this is the real tragedy. When a factory shuts down, it's not just the company that suffers. It's the workers, their families, the local businesses that depend on those paychecks, and the towns that slowly wither without that industrial backbone. So, where do we go from here? How do we keep American companies in America? That's the question we'll tackle next. The solutions, the strategies, and the tough choices that lie ahead. Because if we don't figure this out, the Freightliners of the world might just keep rolling away for good. Let's talk about the human side of this story. When factories like Freightliner consider moving production overseas, it's not just a matter of numbers and spreadsheets. It's about people, real people with real lives. Imagine the scene. It's 6 a.m. on a cold Monday morning. You're a Freightliner worker. You pull into the parking lot of the factory where you've worked for 20 years. You grab your lunchbox, walk past the same faces you've seen for decades, friends, co-workers, people you consider family. You clock in, put on your gloves, and head to your station. You've got bills to pay, kids to feed, maybe a mortgage hanging over your head. But then, one day, the rumor mill starts turning. Whispers spread through the break room. People talk about Freightliner moving production overseas. At first, it's just talk. But then you notice management walking the factory floor more often, taking notes, holding closed-door meetings. You see the worried looks, the whispered conversations. And then the announcement comes. The plant is shutting down. Production is moving to Mexico, or maybe Thailand, or somewhere with cheaper labor and fewer regulations. Your heart sinks. You've given decades of your life to this company. You've built your life around these paychecks. You've planned your kids' futures around this job. But now, it's over. And it's not just about the paycheck. It's about the dignity of work, the pride you felt in building something with your own two hands. It's about the community you've been a part of, the co-workers you shared coffee breaks with, the families you saw at company picnics, the friendships you built over the years. And when that factory shuts down, it's like a ripple in a pond. It's not just the Freightliner workers who suffer, it's the local diners that lose their regulars, the corner stores that lose their customers, the small businesses that rely on those factory paychecks. Entire towns can wither when a big employer leaves. Schools lose funding, property values drop, families move away, seeking work elsewhere, and once those jobs are gone, they rarely come back. So, what do you do if you're one of those workers? Do you pack up and leave? Start over somewhere else? Do you try to retrain for a new career at 50, 60 years old? It's a terrifying choice, and one that too many American workers have had to make. And that's why this conversation isn't just about Freightliner or tariffs or profit margins. It's about the human cost of these decisions. It's about the lives that are upended, the communities that are torn apart, and the families that are left struggling to pick up the pieces. And if we want to fix this problem, we need to start by putting people first. We need to rethink how we protect American jobs, how we support our workers, and how we rebuild the communities that have been left behind. And that's exactly what we'll tackle in the next part. the solutions, the strategies, and the tough choices that lie ahead. Because if we don't, the heart of American manufacturing might just keep breaking, one factory at a time. So, what's the solution? How do we keep Freightliner and other American manufacturers from packing up and leaving the country? Well, let's start with the obvious. Tariffs alone won't solve this problem. If anything, they've shown us that protecting American jobs is more complicated than just slapping a tax on foreign imports. For starters, we need smarter trade policies. Policies that don't just protect a few industries while putting others at risk. Imagine trying to protect a single tree while ignoring the health of the entire forest. You might save one tree, but if the forest burns down, what's the point? The same goes for manufacturing. We can't just focus on one part of the supply chain while ignoring the bigger picture. Take steel and aluminum, for example. Yes, protecting these industries is important, but when the cost of those materials goes up, every manufacturer that uses them, from car makers to appliance companies to aerospace firms, gets hit with higher costs. And that means higher prices for consumers, lower sales, and ultimately, fewer American jobs. So, what's the alternative? Maybe it's time to rethink how we compete in a global economy. Instead of just protecting our industries, why not invest in making them stronger, more innovative, and more competitive? Look at Germany. They've managed to keep a strong manufacturing base, not by closing themselves off, but by investing in advanced technology, skilled labor, and world-class training programs. Or consider South Korea. They've built some of the most advanced factories in the world by embracing automation, robotics, and smart manufacturing. And it's not just about technology. It's about investing in people, the workers who build these products and keep these factories running. Imagine if the US invested more in vocational training, apprenticeships, and workforce development. Imagine if we made it easier for American workers to adapt to new technologies and changing market demands. And let's not forget about small businesses. They're the backbone of the American economy, and they suffer just as much, if not more, when big manufacturers leave. What if we gave small businesses the support they need to grow, innovate, and create jobs in their local communities? And what about tax incentives? Instead of punishing companies with tariffs, why not reward them for keeping jobs in the US? Why not offer tax breaks for companies that invest in American workers, build new factories, or bring production back home? And finally, let's talk about trade deals. If we want to compete globally, we need fair trade agreements that level the playing field, protect American workers, and hold our trading partners accountable. So, where do we go from here? It's up to us, as consumers, as voters, as citizens, to demand smarter policies, better leadership, and a long-term vision for American manufacturing. Because if we don't, we'll keep losing factories, jobs, and entire industries to countries that are willing to play the long game. And that's not a future any of us want. So, if you care about the future of American manufacturing, hit that like button, share this video, and let's start the conversation. Because the time for change is now. So, where do we stand? After all the facts, figures, and tough choices, what have we really learned? First, we've seen that Freightliner and other American manufacturers aren't just facing a numbers game. They're facing a fight for survival in a global economy where every penny counts. We've talked about the impact of Trump's tariffs, how they've driven up raw material costs, squeezed profit margins, and forced companies to consider moving production overseas. We've looked at the human cost, the factory workers, the families, and the communities that pay the ultimate price when factories close their doors. And we've explored the potential solutions: smarter trade policies, investment in advanced manufacturing, support for American workers, and a renewed focus on innovation. But here's the real question. What kind of country do we want to be? Do we want to be a nation that builds, that creates, that leads the world in innovation and manufacturing? Or do we want to let our industrial power slip away, one factory at a time? Because at the end of the day, this isn't just about Freightliner. It's about the future of American manufacturing. It's about whether we have the vision, the courage, and the commitment to rebuild our industrial backbone. So here's my challenge to you. The next time you see a Made in the USA label, remember what it stands for. It stands for jobs. It stands for families. It stands for communities. It stands for a country that can still make things, that can still compete, and that can still lead the world in innovation. But that only happens if we stand up, speak out, and demand better policies, smarter leadership, and a long-term vision for American manufacturing. So, if you care about the future of this country, if you want to see American factories thrive again, hit that like button, share this video, and subscribe for more conversations like this. Because this isn't just about one company, it's about all of us. And if we work together, maybe, just maybe, we can bring American manufacturing back, stronger than ever.